Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson, Chapter 1. In the late spring of 1995, just a few weeks after I turned 28, I got a letter from my friend Madison Roberts. I still thought of her as Madison Billings. I heard from Madison 4 or 5 times a year, updates on her life that were as foreign to me as reports from the moon. Her existence the kind you only read about in magazines. She was married to an older man, a senator, and she had a little boy who seemed to dress in nautical suits and who looked like an expensive teddy bear that had turned human. I was working 2 cashier jobs at competing grocery stores, smoking weed in the attic of my mother's house, because when I had turned 18, she had immediately turned my childhood bedroom into a workout room, a huge Nordic track filling the place where I unhappily grown up. I sporadically dated people who didn't deserve me but thought they did. You can imagine how Madison's letters were 100 times more interesting than mine. But we stayed in touch. This letter had broken up the natural spacing of our correspondence, precise and expected, but that didn't give me pause. Madison and I did not communicate except on paper. I didn't even have her phone number. I was on break at the Save-A-Lot the first chance I had to read the thing, and I opened it up to find that Madison wanted me to come to Franklin, Tennessee, where she lived, on her husband's estate, because she had an interesting job opportunity for me. She included a $50 bill for bus fare, because she knew that my car wasn't great with more than 15-mile distances. She wouldn't say what the job was, though it couldn't be worse than dealing with food stamps and getting the scale to properly weigh the bruised apples. I used the last 5 minutes of my break to ask Derek, my boss, if I could have a few days off. I knew he'd say no, and I didn't urge him to this refusal. I'd never been the most responsible employee. It was the hard thing about having 2 jobs. You had to disappoint them at different times, and sometimes you lost track of who you messed up over worse. I thought about Madison, maybe the most beautiful woman I'd ever met in real life, who was also so weirdly smart, always considering the odds of every scenario. If she had a job for me, I'd take it. I'd leave my mom's attic. I'd empty out my life because I was honest enough to know that I didn't have much that I miss when it disappeared. A week after I wrote back to Madison with the date that I'd arrived, a man in a polo shirt and sunglasses was waiting inside the bus station in Nashville. He looked like a man who was really into watches. "William Baker?" he asked. I nodded. "Miss Roberts asked me to escort you back to the Roberts estate. My name is Carl." "Are you their driver?" I asked curiously. As to particular of wealth, I knew rich people on TV had drivers, but it seemed like Hollywood absurdity that didn't connect to the real world. "No, not exactly. I'm just kind of a jack of all trades. I help Senator Roberts and Mrs. Roberts by extension when when things come up." "Do you know what I'm doing here?" I asked. I knew what cops sounded like, and Carl sounded like a cop. I wasn't super jazzed about law enforcement, so I was feeling him out. "I believe I do, but I'll let Miss Roberts talk to you. I think she would prefer that." "What kind of car are you driving?" I asked him. "Is it your own car?" I had been on a bus for a couple of hours with people who communicated only in hacking coughs and weird sniffs. I just wanted to hear my own voice get out into the open air. "It's a Matia. It's mine. Are you ready to go, ma'am?" "May I take your luggage?" Carl asked, clearly ready to successfully complete the portion of his task. He had a cop-like tick where he tried to hide his impatience with tight formality. "I didn't bring anything," I said. "Excellent. If you'll follow me, I'll get you to Miss Roberts, ASAP." When we got to the Murtia, a hot red number that seemed too small to be on the road, I asked him if we could ride with the top down, but he said it wasn't such a good idea. It looked like it pained him to refuse, but it also looked like maybe it pained him to be asked. I couldn't quite figure out Carl, so I settled down into the car and let everything move past me. Miss Roberts says that you're her oldest friend, Carl says, making conversation. That might be right, I said. We've known each other for a while. I didn't say that the Madisons probably didn't have each other real friends. I didn't hold it against her. I didn't have any real friends either. What I also didn't say was I wasn't even sure that we were actually friends at all. What we were was something weird, but Carl didn't want to hear any of that, so we just rode in silence the rest of the way. The radio playing, easily listening, that made me want to slip into a hot bath and dream about killing everyone I knew. I met Madison at a fancy girls' school hidden on a mountain in the middle of nowhere. 100 or so years ago, maybe even longer, all the men who managed to make enough money in such barren landscapes decided that they needed a school to prepare their daughters for eventually of marrying other rich men, moving up in life until no one remembered a time when they had been anything other than experimenting. They brought some British guys to Tennessee, and he ran the place like a school for princesses. And soon other rich men from other barren landscapes sent their daughters, and then after this happened enough times, rich people in real cities like New York and Chicago started hearing about this school and started sending their own daughters. And if you can catch that kind of good luck, it holds for centuries. I grew up in the valley of that mountain, just poor enough that I could imagine a way out. I lived with my mom and a rotating cast of her boyfriends. My father either died or just checked out. My mother was a vague about him, not a single picture. It seemed like maybe some Greek god had assumed the form of a stallion and impregnated her before returning to his home atop Mount Olympus. More likely it was just a pervert in one of the fancy homes that my mom cleaned. Maybe he was some alderman in town, and I'd seen him all my life without knowing it. But I prefer to think he was dead, and he was wholly incapable of shaving me from my happiness. The school, the Iron Mountain Girl Preparatory School, offered one or two full scholarships each year to girls in the valley who showed promise. And though it might be hard to believe now, I showed a lot of promise. I had spent my childhood gritting my teeth and smashing everything to bits in the name of excellence. I taught myself to read at 3 years old, matching the storybooks that came with records to the words the narrators spoke through the little speakers. When I was 8, my mother put me in charge of our finances, the weekly budgeting from the envelopes of cash that she brought home at night. I made straight A's. At first it was purely out of instructional desire to be superlative, as if I suspected that I was a superhero and was merely testing the limits of my power. But once teachers started to tell me about Iron Mountain and the scholarship information that my mother could not have cared less about, I redacted my efforts. I didn't know redacted my efforts. I didn't know that the school was just some ribbon that rich girls obtained on their way to destined future. I thought it was trained ground for Amazons. I made other students cry at the spelling bee. I plagiarized scientific studies and dumbled them down just enough to win country science fair. I memorized poems about Harlem and awkwardly recited them to my mom's boyfriend, who thought I was some weird demon speaking in tongues. I played point guard on the boys' traveling basketball teams because there wasn't one for the girls. I made people in my town, whether they were poor or middle class, especially upper middle class, feel good, like I was something they could agree on, a sterling representative of this little backwoods country. I wasn't destined for greatness. I knew this, but I figured out how to steal it from someone stupid enough to relax their grip on it. I got the scholarship, and some of my teachers even raised enough money to help cover expenses for books and food, since my mother told me flat out she couldn't afford any of it. When it was time for school to start, I put on some ugly jumpers, the only nice thing I owned, and my mother dropped me off with a duffel bag filled with my stuff, including three changes of the school uniform, black shirt, and a white blouse. Other parents there in their BMWs and cars so fancy I didn't know the names of them. God, look at this place, my mom said, heavy metal on the radio, fidgeting with the unit's unlit cigarette because I asked her not to smoke so it wouldn't get in my hair. Lillian, this is going to sound so mean, but you don't belong here. It don't mean that they're better than you. It just means you're gonna have a rough go of it. It's good opportunity, I told her. You got. I understand that. She said as patient as she'd ever been with me. Enough the engine was still idling. You got, and I know that you want better than, but you're going from to gold, and it's going to be real enough to handle that. I hope you make it. I didn't get angry with her. I knew that my mom loved me, even though not in the way she was obvious that other people would understand. She wanted me to be okay. At least that I at least that. But I also knew that my mom didn't exactly like me. I weirded her out. I crammed her style. It was fine with me. I didn't hate her for that, or maybe I did, but I was a teenager. I hated everyone. She pushed in the car's cigarette lighter, and while she was waiting for it to fire up, she kissed me softly and gave me a hug. You can come back home any time, sweetie, she said, but I imagined that I'd kill myself if I had to do that. I got outside of the car and she drove off. As I walked to my dorm, I realized that the other girls didn't even look at me, and I could tell that it wasn't out of meanness. I don't think they even saw me. Their eyes had been trained since birth to recognize importance. I wasn't that. And I followed and then I found Madison in my room, the room we were going to share. All the information that I had on her had been provided in a brief letter during the summer, informing me that my roommate would be Madison Billings, and that she was from Atlanta, Georgia. Chet, an ex-boyfriend of my mom's, who still hung around the house when she wasn't dating someone else, had seen the letter and said, I bet she's from the Billings department store. That's Atlanta too. That's big money. How would you know Chet? I asked. I didn't mind Chet so much. He was goofy, which was better than alternative. He had a tattoo of Betty Boop on his forearm. You gotta pick up on the little clues, he told me. He drove a forklift. Information is power. Madison had shoulder-length blonde hair and was wearing a yellow summer dress with hundreds of little orange goldfish prints on it. Even in flip-flops, she was model tall, and I could tell that the shoes on her feet would be so soft that she had a perfect nose would be so soft. She had a perfect nose, blue eyes, enough freckles to look wholesome without looking like God had blessed her with bad skin. The whole room smelled of jasmine. She already arranged the space, had chosen the bed farthest from the door. When she asked me, she smiled like we were friends. Are you Lillian? Uh, she asked, and I could only nod. I felt like a kid on the Bozo show in my jumper. I'm Madison, she told me. It's nice to meet you. She held out her hand. Her nails painted a faint pink, like the nose of a bunny rabbit. I'm Lillian, I said, and I shook her hand. I'd never shaken the hand of someone my own age. They told me that you're a scholarship kid. She then informed me Though there wasn't any judgment in her voice, she seemed to want to make it clear that she knew. "Why did they tell you that?" I asked her, my face reddening. "I don't know," she told me, though. "Maybe they wanted to make sure I'd be polite about it." "Well, okay, I guess," I said. I felt like I was 40, 50 steps behind Madison, and the school had already making harder for me to catch up. "Doesn't matter to me," she told me. "I prefer it. Rich girls are the worst." "Are you not a rich girl?" I asked hopefully. "I'm a rich girl," she said, "but I'm not like the most rich girl. Think that's why they put me with you." "Well, good," I said. I was sweating so hard. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Why didn't you want to come to this place?" "Why'd you want to come to this place?" "I don't know. It's a good school, right?" I said. Madison had a kind of discreet that I didn't experience before, where that should get her killed somehow seemed okay because her eyes were so blue and she didn't seem to be joking. "Yeah, I guess, but like what you did you want to get out of this place?" she asked. "Can I put down my bag?" I asked. I touched my face and sweat was beading up and starting to trickle down my neck. She gently took my bag from me and placed it on the floor. Then she gestured to my bed unmade and I sat on it. She sat beside me, closer than I'd prefer. "What do you want to be?" she asked me. "I don't know. Jesus, I don't know," I said. I thought Madison was going to kiss me. "My parents want me to get amazing grades and go to the Vanderbilt and marry some Universal president and have beautiful babies." My dad was so specific. "We'd love it if you married Universal president, but I'm not doing that." "Why not?" I said. If the Universal president was sexy, I'd jump right into the life that Madison's parents imagined for her. I'd want to be powerful. I'd want to be the person who makes big things happen, where people owe me so many favors that they can never pay me back. I want to be so important that if I mess up ever mess up, I'll never get punished. She looked psychotic and she said this. I want to make out with her. She flipped her hair in such a way that I could only have been instinctual evolution. "I feel like I can tell you this." "Why?" I asked. "Because you're poor, right? But you're here. You want power too." "I just want to go to college to get out of here," I said, but I felt like maybe she was right. I'd learned to want all that stuff, and she said I could go for power. "I think we'll be friends," she said. "I hope so, at least," I said, trying to keep my whole body from convulsing. "I hope so too." And and we did become friends, I guess you could say. She had to uh, tamp down her weirdness in public because it scared people when beautiful people didn't act a certain way, made themselves ugly. And I had to tramp down my weirdness because people already suspected that I was supremely strange because I was a scholarship kid. A few days into my time there, another scholarship girl from a town that bordered mine, she came up to me and said, "Now, in a mean way, please don't talk to me the entire time that we are here." And I agreed immediately. It was better this way. The point is, we had to be composed in public, so it was nice to come to our shared space and cut out pictures of Bo and Luke Duke and rub them all over our bodies. It was nice to hear Madison talk about being a lawyer who sends the most evil man in the world to the electric chair. I told her that I wanted to grow up and be able to eat Milky Way bars every single morning for breakfast. She said that was better than wanting to be President of the United States of America, which Madison kind of wanted to be. We also played on the basketball team, the only two freshmen to start in years and years. The team was no joke, had won a few state titles at Iron Mount basketball and cross country were hugely important to the school's identity. I suspected that for most girls, they were a great way to add complexity to their college applications, but there were girls like me who just really liked being all over the weaker people. I played point guard and Madison, so tall, played for power forward. We spent a lot of time in the gym, just the two of us, running full court, sprinting, shooting our inordinate hands. I've always been good, but a I got better with Madison on my team. She gave me some kind of extraordinary court vision. She was so beautiful that I could find her without even looking. We were Magic and Carmen. We told each other that we wanted to hear high black high tops, but but he refused. Jesus, girls, you act like you're New York playground legends, he said. Just don't get in foul trouble or turn the ball over. There were times when Madison left me behind, but I didn't take it personally. I think if I'd been a different kind of person, and I didn't mean wealthy, I could have been a part of it, but I had no interest. She and other beautiful girls would just sit together at lunch. Sometimes they would sneak off campus and hang out at the bar near the experimental art college where the boys hit on them. Sometimes they cocaine from some super sketchy dude, bought cocaine from some super sketchy dude named Panda. Madison would show up in the room at 3 in the morning, somehow eluding the dorm parents who watched over us, and sit on the floor drinking a huge bottle of water. I hate myself for being so damn predictable, she would say. It looks fun, I said, lying. It can be, she said, her pupils crazy big, but it's just a phase. School was more complicated than there than in the valley, but the classes weren't hard. I made straight A's, so did Madison. I won poetry contests. I wrote about growing up poor. Madison had told me to do it after I showed her my first poem, which was about a tulip. Using use it at the right time, she said. Told me, by which I think she meant my bad upbringing, and you'll get a lot out of it. I think I understood. I mean, here I was at Iron Mountain, thrilling. I got here. Madison sometimes slept in my little bed. The two of us wrapped around each other. I had good things, and I wasn't as hard to admit it to where I'd been before. I ended up right here I belonged, right where I belonged. And then one of Madison's beautiful friends, the least beautiful of the six, one of them, if you want to be cruel, got upset at a joke that Madison made, a moment when Madison's weirdness had spilled out beyond the confines of our dorm room. And so the girl told the dorm parents that Madison had a big bag of coke in her desk drawer. The dorm parents checked, and there it was. Iron Mountain was a place for rich people, and it depended on those rich people. So Madison hopped in bed with me one night, and we talked it over, that the school would go easy on her. But I was not rich, and what I understand was that sometimes a place like Iron Mountain made an example of one rich person in order to gain the trust of a bunch of other rich people. It was almost the end of the year, just a few weeks till final exams, and the headmaster of the school, no longer some British dude, but some Southern woman named Miss Lipton, with a white shell of hairstyle and a maroon pantsuit, called with a white shell, called Madison and her parents to meet with her in the office. The invitation sent on official letterhead. Miss Lipton called everyone daughter, but had never even married. Madison's father drove up the night before. Her mother was unable to come, so overwhelmed with disappointment, Mr. Billings told Madison over the phone he wanted to take us out to dinner and kind of farewell for Madison and me. Although I thought that seemed weird, he picked us up in the brand new Jaguar. He was an older than I expected, and he looked like Andy Griffin, with the wrinkling way of acknowledging you. "Hello, girls," he said, opening the door to the car. Madison just grunted and hopped in, but Mr. Billings took my hand and kissed it. "Madison has told me so much about you, Mrs. Lillan," he said. "Okay," I said. I was still unsteady with adults. I thought maybe he wanted to sleep with me. We drove to a steakhouse, and there was a table reserved for us, though Mr. Billings said it was 4, and then I saw my mom dressed up for her, but not dressed up enough for this place. She looked at me with the kind of what have you done look on her face, but then quickly smiled at Mr. Billings, who introduced himself, then kissed her hand, which my mother was so jazzed about, clearly. "A drink, ma'am?" he asked my mom, who ordered a gin and tonic. He ordered a bourbon neat. It felt like we had insanely become a new family. I kept looking at Madison for some kind of clue as to whether she was freaking out too, but she wouldn't even look at me, just kept running her eyes up and down the menu. "I'm happy you two could join us, Madison and myself, on this night," Mr. Billings said after we ordered. My mother had chosen a filet, which was listed as $25, but I got the chicken fettuccine, which was the cheapest thing on the menu. As much as I tried to remember, I have no idea what Madison and her dad ordered. "Thank you for inviting me," my mom said. She had lived a hard life, smoking too much, but she had been a cheerleader and a beauty queen in high school. She was still beautiful, I had to admit it, a beauty that she'd not passed on to me, and I could see how she just might, in this setting, seduce Mr. Billings for a night. "I'm afraid the reason for our gathering is not so happy," he said, looking at Madison, who was now staring at the tablecloth in front of her. "I'm afraid Madison has gotten herself into some trouble, because she is headstrong. I have 5 children, but Madison is the youngest, and she is more trouble than the other 4 put together." "4 boys," Madison said, a little flash of anger. Anyway, Madison had made a mistake, and she is going to be punished for it, or that seemed to be what awaits us tomorrow morning, and that is why I wanted to talk to you and Lillian here. Dad, began, Madison began, but he froze her with a hard stare. "Did Lillian do something wrong?" my mom asked. She already had her second gin and tonic. "No, my dear," Mr. Billing continued. "Lillian has been an exemplary woman while at Iron Mountain. I'm sure you're quite proud of her." "I am," my mother said, but it sounded like a question. "Oh, well, here's the situation. I'm a businessman, and such. I'm always looking at things from a different angle, seeing all the possibilities. Now, my wife refused to come here. She thinks that Madison needs to accept her punishment and aspire to do better with what's left of her. But my wife, though I love her, hasn't fully considered the ramifications of Madison's expulsion. The effect it would have on her future is more than I can state." "Well, kids make mistakes," my mother said. "That's how they learn." Mr. Billings smiled, slipped from the briefest moments, and then recovered. "That's right," he said. "They learn. They make mistakes, and they learn never to do it again. But in Madison's case, it won't matter that she won't ever do it again. Her fate has been sealed. And so I come to you with an offer." And I knew right, and I was so angry that I hadn't known it hours before. I looked at Madison, and of course she wouldn't look at me. I grabbed her arm under the table and squeezed it, but she didn't even flinch. "What's the offer?" my mom said, slightly drunk, very interested. "I believe that the headmaster would be more forgiving if the student were someone other than Madison," he said. "I think it's, for instance, if it was your daughter, a virtuous girl who had made so much of herself while dealing with such hardship, the headmistress would offer a courtesy punishment at most of a headmaster's suspension, a semester suspension. Why, my mother asked, and I wanted to kick her in the face. I wanted to sober her up, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Complicated, ma'am. It's complicated, ma'am, Mr. Billings said, but I do believe this. I believe that if you and Lillian marched into the woman's office tomorrow morning and told her the drugs were actually Lillian's, the punishment would be quite lenient. That's a big maybe, my mother said. Maybe she wasn't as drunk as I thought. Well, it is a risk, I admit it. I admit that, which is why I would be willing to reimburse you for your troubles. In fact, I have a check made out to you, Mrs. Baker, for $10,000. I believe that it would help towards Miss Lillian's continuing education. I believe there's enough in that gift to cover some of your own expenses. $10,000, my mom repeated. That's correct. Mom, I said, just as Madison was saying. Dad, but they both shut us up. Right then, Madison looked at me. Her eyes were so blue, even in the dim light of the steakhouse. It was such a strange feeling to hate someone and yet love them at the same. I was wondering if this was normal for adults. But Mr. Billings and my mom kept talking. The food came, and Madison and I didn't eat a single bit of our dishes. I stopped listening to anything. Madison grabbed my hand under the table and held on to it right up to right up until her father paid the bill and escorted us out of the restaurant. His check in my mom's purse. That night we had dropped us off at our dorm, and we signed ourselves back in. Madison asked if I could sleep in my bed. She could sleep in my bed. Sleep in my bed with me. But I told her, no. I brushed my teeth, and then while she sat in her bed, she read Shakespeare for some paper she had to write. She wasn't going to be expelled after all. I packed up my duffel bag. How in the world did I hold less than when I arrived? What was my life? I got into bed and shut off my light. A few minutes later, Madison turned off her light, and we both sat there in the dark, not saying anything. I didn't know how long it took, but she finally crept over to my side of the room and stood over me. She was only my friend. I scooted over and she crawled into my bed. She wrapped her arms around me, and I could feel her chest pressing against my back. I'm sorry, she said. Madison was all I could manage. I didn't want something, and I didn't get it. I'd wanted something, and I didn't get it, or it was going to be harder to get it when I got another chance. You're my best friend, she said, but I couldn't say anything else. I laid there until I fell asleep. When the dorm parent knocked on our door in the morning to say that my mother was outside waiting for me, I realized that sometime in the night Madison had gone back to her own bed. The headmistress seemed to know that I was lying. She tried several times to get me to alter my story, but my mother kept butting in, saying how hard my life has been, and then Miss Lipton expelled me. My mother didn't even seem that shocked. I never even smoked one of my mom's cigarette. I'd never even smoked one of my mom's cigarette at this point, and I was kicked out for school for drugs. I felt like I'd been good for nothing. When I got to the room to get my duffel bag, Madison was gone. On the drive back to the valley, my mom said that she would set aside money for college tuition, but I knew that money had already gone. It had vaporized the moment it touched her hands. 4 months later, I got a letter from Madison. She told me about her summer vacation in Maine. She told me how awful the last week of school had been without me there, and how so badly she wanted me to come visit her in Atlanta. There was no mention of what happened to me, what I'd done for her. She told me about a boy she'd met in Maine, and how stuffed she'd let him how much stuff she let him do. I could hear her voice in the letter. It was a pretty voice. I wrote back and I mentioned the awful stuff between us. We became pen pals. I went back to my awful public school, which felt like returning to a sea level after spending a year on the highest mountain peak. All the teachers and students, everyone in the town had heard about my expulsion, the cocaine, the fact that I had messed up my one chance to improve my circumstances. They invited a little twist in the basic story to make it seem even worse, and they blamed me. They were so angry, like why they ever taught someone like me could have handled such an experience. And so they gave up on me, stopped talking about colleges, about scholarships. I turned into a ghost, the story, and lived in the town, a cautionary tale. But who would it scare? Who would listen? Everybody was so easy and nobody cared, and I lost interest. I started working after school, helping my mom clean houses. I started hanging out with idiot boys and girls who had access to weed and pills, and I stayed with them as long as they didn't expect anything from me. Then, when they did expect things, I just bought weed myself and smoked joints on the back porch of my house all alone, feeling the world flattened out. I started to care less about the future. I cared more about making the present tolerable, and time passed, and that was my life. As we neared the estate, all I could see were green pastures and what felt like miles and miles of white fences. I couldn't understand what the fences were there for, because it wouldn't keep anything in or out. It was purely ornamental, and like, duh, I realized if you had this much money, you could make a gesture that were purely ornam- ornamental. I reminded myself to be smarter. I was smart. I just had a thick layer of stupid that had settled on top of me, but I was still wild when I needed to be. I'd get smarter whenever Madison had. It was easy. The driveway felt like a mile long, and it looked like it would lead you straight to the gates of heaven. That's how perfect maintained it was. It could have ended at a run-down pizza joint with bars on the windows, and you'd still be so thrilled. Almost there, Carl said. What is the mail situation like? I said. What do you mean? He asked. Do they have to walk all the way to the end of the driveway just to get the mail? Or do they have a golf cart, or does someone go and get it for them? I didn't ask if he was the one who got the mail for them, but I felt like maybe he knew that I was wondering. Well, the postman brings it to the door, he said. Oh, okay, I said. I thought about Madison sitting on her porch, drinking sweet tea and waiting patiently while the postman crept up the driveway bearing a letter for me about my ideas for a tattoo on my ankle. I had often fantasized about Madison's home. It seemed weird to ask her for a photo of the mansion. Like, hey, I could live with I could live without another photo of your teddy bear son, but please send me a picture of every single one of your bathrooms in your mansion. When she sent photos, I could make out parts of the house, expensive and well maintained. Maybe if I had cut them into pieces and reassembled them, I could have seen the whole mansion. Sometimes it was simpler just to believe that Madison lived in the White House. That made sense to me at the time. Madison lived in the White House. Now, as we pulled up to the estate, I felt this diamond form in my throat, and it almost grabbed Carl's hand for support. The house was 3 stories, maybe more. I couldn't crane my neck enough to see the top of it. All I knew was the moment it went all the way up to space. It was blindingly white, not one trace of mold or dirt, a house that you built in your dreams. There were a huge porch that seemed to wrap around the entire structure. It must have been a mile if you walked it. It I had been prepared for wealth, but clearly my life had left me ill-prepared for what wealth could be. And was Madison's husband even really all that rich? He hadn't invited com computers. He hadn't invented computers or owned fast food empires, and yet his level of wealth had given him this house. It had given him Madison, who suddenly appeared in the front doorway, and she was waving so beautiful that I knew I'd take her over the house every single time I had a choice. Carl pulled the car around the fountain in the middle of the driveway and stopped right at the front door of the house. While the car idled, he swiftly ducked out of his seat and came around to open my door. I couldn't get up. I couldn't make my legs work. Madison suddenly walked down the stairs and held out her arms for an embrace. But I couldn't meet her. I felt like if I moved one muscle, the whole thing would evaporate, and I would wake back up on my futon. The AC broken again. Carl finally had AC broken again. Carl finally had to haul me up, ragdolling me as if I were a gift for Madison's birthday. And then I fell into her arms. She was so tall, so strong, that she held me until I smelled the scent of her, until I remembered her. The two of us in bed in that dorm room, and everything was tangible again. It was real. I straightened up, and there I was, standing there. It was the first time in almost 15 years that I'd seen Madison, but she looked the same. She'd gotten a little tanner and filled out in the way suggested adulthood that suggested adulthood, but she didn't look like a robot. She didn't look soulless. You look so beautiful, she said, and I believed her. Well, you look like a supermodel, I replied. I wish I were a supermodel, she said. I wish I had a calendar that was nothing but me. And like that, it was the two of us again. Me being weird and revealing that, by God, she was weird too. Carl checked his watch, did this little bow, and then hopped back in the car and drove away. We could have spent the rest of the day watching him drive away. I kind of wanted to. I kept waiting for his car to turn into some dumb gourd and him to turn into a mouse. Waited for magic, and I didn't think it would be disappointed. "It's so hot out here," she said. "Come inside." "Is this your house?" I asked. Madison smiled. "It's one of them," she said, and her nose wrinkled and her eyes got all twinkly. She couldn't talk like this with her husband. None of the other women who lived in the this was good. Luxury. This was good. She couldn't believe her good fortune either. Inside the house, I didn't know what I'd expect, but it was pretty plain. There wasn't a lot of crazy art on the walls, but I thought maybe there would be a space-age furniture. But this is the kind of wealth where things were so plain that you didn't realize how expensive they were until you touched them or got close and saw what how they were made with great care and with super fancy materials. In the hallway was a huge portrait of Madison and her husband from their wedding. She looked like she had just been crowned Miss America, and he looked like the mace who once been famous. I couldn't tell if it was love, but I knew that I was no real judge of love, having never experienced it or even witnessed it in a single time in my life. Madison had met Senator Jasper Roberts when she'd worked on his re-election campaign right after she graduated from Vanderbilt University with a degree in political science. She started at the lowest rung, brought on because the normality untouched senator had recently left his wife and two kids and started dating one of the biggest donors, some uh, Harris kids, some Harris who was obsessed with horses, who wore crazy hats. They wanted to get a woman's perspective on things, I guess. The dudes at the top who had the senator's ear had told him that he had to be super dignified about it and never talk about it and Hiram's like Muppets if anyone ever brought it up. I remember her letter to me about this time. Jesus, these guys are so stupid, she wrote. It's like they never followed up on a single stupid thing that they've ever done, and so they just fix it. Because Madison was so brilliant, and because what she had that slightly skewed way of saying things in a straightforward manner that broke you in half. The senator ended up putting her in charge of the campaign, and of course he did this because he was falling in love with her, like everyone did, and because the Harris wouldn't shut up about some horse that she wanted to buy. Madison made him conflictory. She wrote his speeches, every single one. He confessed to his failings and his despite to make his conspicuously preposterous to help every single person he represented had caused him to lose sight of what made his own family happy, and now he lost that family. He couldn't lose his larger family, the voters, the greater state of Tennessee. It wasn't that hard. He was a political legend, generous of Robert's men running things so much wealth that people just assumed that they had to vote for him. He merely had to show up, and he was aware that he'd done a thing, and he won, and Madison got kind of famous in these political circles. It's really all because his stupid opponent didn't know what he was doing. She admitted it in another letter. If I'd been on that side of things, Jasper wouldn't have lost. And then they got married, and then she got pregnant, and now she had this life. We sat on the sofa, and it was like sitting on a cloud, the exact opposite of my ratty futon, which felt like getting stuck in a hole in the floor, trapped there for all eternity. I wondered how much of this decor had been Madison's choosing, and how much of it was left over from her husband's previous wife. There were sandwiches on tire trays, lots of mayo, and cucumbers so tiny that they looked like a dollhouse food. There was a pitcher of sweet tea and 2 glasses with a big solid chunk of pristine ice in them. The ice had even begun to melt, and I realized that they must have materialized just seconds before we entered the room. "Do you remember that day we first met?" Madison asked. "Of course I do," I said. It hadn't been that long ago. Had it been a long time ago to her? "You had a dress with a goldfish on it. My dad had that dress made for me by a dressmaker in Atlanta. I hated it. Goldfish?" He was clueless. "Wait, is he dead?" I asked, suddenly suspicious. "No, he's alive," she said. "Oh, good," I said. "I didn't mean it. It just came out." "Good," I added just in case. "I remember that maybe you hadn't even brushed your hair," she said. "No, I definitely brushed my hair," I told her. "I remember when you walked in the room like a lightning bolt. I knew that I was going to love you. I wonder where your husband was. I felt like we were about to make out. I felt like maybe the job was to be her secret lover. My pulse was racing, and it always did, in her presence. When I didn't respond, her eyes turned a little glassy all of a sudden, and then she said, "I always felt like I missed out on something really wonderful when you left Iron Mountain. We weren't going to have a reckoning, not really, not yet. She wasn't going to bring up the fact that her not-dead father had paid me off to take the fall for her, so that she could have this mansion, this senator's husband, and these expensive things I understood being polite. But now you're here," she said. She poured sweet tea, and I drank it in like 2 gulps. She didn't even look surprised. She just filled my glass up again. I ate one of the sandwiches, and it was gross, but I was hungry. I ate 2 more. I didn't even realize that There were tiny plates stacked on trays. I held the sandwich in my dumb hands. I didn't even want to look down at my lap because I knew there were crumbs there. "Where's Timothy?" I expected to see her son walk into the room with a coonskin cap and a wooden pop gun, his skin pale in old royalty. "He's taking a nap," she said. "He loves naps. He's lazy, like me." "I love naps, too," I said. "How many sandwiches did you eat at something like this?" There were nearly 20 more on the tray. "Did you ever leave some for property's sake?" He hadn't touched them. "Wait, they were decorative? I bet you want to know why I asked you to come all this way," she said. It sank in that this was temporary, that I had to leave, so I became curious as to what had been so important that we finally had to see each other face to face after so many years of correspondence. "You said there was an opportunity for me," I continued, "like a job, maybe?" "I thought of you because, Lillian, this is honestly was very private, what I'm about to tell you regarding of what you decide to do. I need someone who could be discreet, who knows how to keep a secret." I can be discreet," I said. "I love this stuff. Bad stuff." "I know," she said, almost blushing, but not really. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yes and no," she said, twisting her mouth like she was rising it out. "Yes and no. Did I ever tell you about Jasper's first family?" "I didn't think so. I read about them, I think." "Do you mean his first wife?" She looked apologetic, like she knew she was pulling me into something that might ruin me. But she didn't stop. She didn't send me back into my mom's house. She held on to me. "Well, he had a first wife, a childhood sweetheart, but she's dead. She had a rare kind of cancer, I think, but he doesn't talk about her at all. I know he loves me, but I know he loved her the most. Anyway, after that, there was a long period of grieving, and then he ended up marrying Jane, who was the youngest daughter of a really powerful man in Tennessee politics. Jane was, well, she was strange. She had a darkness inside of her, but not to speak ill of my husband. It was political and advantageous to be married to her. She knew the world he moved and could do the things he needed done. And they had twins, a girl and a boy, and that was their life, until he met that horsewoman and everything went bad. "But then you met him," I offered. "It all worked out." She didn't even smile. She was in this now. She was doing it. It did. We had Timothy. I still get to be involved in politics, just from a different angle, a kind of super portion, and it's nice. Jasper listens to me honestly. Politically kind of Pollock kind of bores him. It's just his family legacy. He likes the fame, but he's not big on laws. Anyway, things are fine." "Well, what happened?" I asked. "Okay, well, Jane died. She died a few months ago." "I'm sorry," I said. I tried to figure out what kind of grief Jane's death would inspire in Madison. None, probably, but I still said that I was sorry. "It's tragic," she said. "She never really recovered from the divorce. She had always been so brittle, so strange. Honestly, she went a little crazy. She called late at night saying the most awful things. Jasper never really understood how to deal with her. I have to talk to her all night long, walking her through the new reality. I'm good, all that stuff. "What happened to her?" I asked. Madison frowned. Her freckles were so beautiful. "Here's what I need to tell you, okay, Lillian? Here's what I need you to promise to keep a secret." "Okay," I said, growing a little irritated. I had already said I'd be keeping the secret. I needed the secret. I needed to eat it for it to live inside me. "Now that Jane had passed away," she continued, "there is no matter of Jasper's children. They're 10 years old, twins, Bessie and Roland, sweet kids. No, I don't know why I said that. I don't know them, but they're kids.
And now, well, they're Jasper's kids. They're his responsibility. And so we're making adjustments in our lives in order to accommodate them. Wait, I asked you never even met your husband's kids? He has seen them? Lillian, please, she said. Can we not focus on this? Are we not already there? I asked. Not yet, she admitted. But if the mom died a while ago, what are they doing now? Are they on their own? I asked. No, of course not. Geez, they're with Jane's parents, super old and not good with kids. We just needed time to get everything prepared for their arrival. In just over a week, they'll be here living with us. Okay, I said. They've been through a lot, Lillian. They are not had the best life. Jane was a difficult person. She kept the children in the house with her and never left. She homeschooled them, but I can't imagine what she taught them. They were not used to people. They are not prepared for change. What do you want me to do about it? I asked. I wanted you to take care of them, Madison finally said. The whole reason I'd taken a bus to see her. Like a nanny? I asked. I don't understand. Like a nanny, I guess. Okay, Madison said more to herself than me. I thought maybe more like governess, like more old-fashioned. How is this different? I asked. I think it's mostly just the way it sounds, really. Though you would handle all aspects of their care. You'd make sure they were happy. You'd teach them so that they could get up to speed with their lessons. You'd monitor their progress, make sure they exercise, make sure they stay clean. Madison, are they like mole people or something? What's wrong with them? I wanted badly for something to be wrong with them. I wanted them to be mutants. They're just kids. But their kids are so wild, Lillian, you have no idea. You don't even know. Timothy seemed pretty easy. I offered so dumb. That was just pictured. Madison said suddenly, weird. I've trained him enough. I kind of had to break him in. Well, he's cute, I said. These kids are cute too, Lillian, Madison replied. What's wrong with them, I asked. Madison hadn't touched her tea during the entire conversation. She was sat down now to buy some time. She drank a whole glass. Finally, she looked at me with great seriousness. Here is the thing, said Jasper, is up for Secretary of State. It's all very hush-hush right now, okay? The other guy is sick and he's going to step down, and some of the president's people have reached out to Jasper to see him about starting the process of vetting him. It's all happening this summer. That's crazy, I said. This could lead to big things like vice president stuff or president, even if everything went just right. Well, that's cool, I said. I imagined Madison as the First Lady of the United States of America. I remembered the time during the basketball game where she elbowed this girl in the throat in order to get a rebound and got kicked out of the game. I smiled. So you see what's going on, right? Jane's dead, and these kids are coming to stay with us, right? When this is all going down. It's crazy. It's very stressful. Vetting this serious. Lillian looked at everything. They already know about the adultery stuff, which they're obviously not thrilled about, but they like Jasper. People like Jasper. I think this might all work out. But these kids, who knows what their lives have been like. I don't want them to mess this up for Jasper. He would be so angry. Like super angry. You just want me to watch over them and keep them safe, I asked. Make sure they're safe and they don't do anything crazy, she replied with her eyes so bright, so hopeful. I knew how to keep order. I knew all the ways to make bad things happen and how to avoid them. I was wise to how people tried to ruin you. These kids would not beat me. And I realized that I was already thinking like I had taken the job. I don't know the first thing about kids. I don't know how to take care of them. What did kids like? What did they eat? What dances were popular with them? I didn't have the slightest idea how to teach kids. If I failed spectacularly at the task. That would mean the end of things with Madison. I never get to visit her in the White House. I'd never be like we never even met. I guess I can do it. I offered, so lame. I made my voice harden. I made my body turn into steel. I'll do it, Madison. I can do it. She reached across the sandwich and hugged me hard. I can tell how much I needed you, she said. I don't have anyone. I need you. Okay, I said. My whole life, maybe I was just biding time until Madison needed me again, until I collapsed into service. I made something good. I honestly wasn't a bad life, if that's all it was. Madison's body, which had been tense and vibrating, relaxed. I finally felt calm, knowing the depth of the situation, saw the bottom, and I knew I could climb into and out of it without incident. I leaned back into the comfort of the sofa, which held me in just the right position. Then I quickly leaned forward and ate 2 more sandwiches. Lillian, Madison said. What? I asked. There's more, actually, she said, grimacing. What? I asked. The kids, Bessie and Roland. There's something I have to tell you about them. I had a quick flash of what might come. It was sexual and some kind of abuse that had left them hollowed out shells, that nothing transformed into some kind of disability, missing limbs, horrific facial scars, a sensitivity to sunlight, a mouth without any teeth at all. And then I moved to hormonical impulses, kittens drowning in the bathtub, knives at the ready. Of course, Madison would wait until I had given myself to her. They have a unique, I don't know what to call it, kind of affection, she began. I couldn't keep quiet. Do they have teeth? I asked, not frightened, but merely wanting to get over with it. Do they kill a kitten? No, what? No, just listen to me, okay? They have this affliction when they get really overwhelmed. Oh, really? I said. They were delicate little kids, didn't like exercise. Fine. Their bodies, for some reason, the doctors haven't quite nailed it down, can quickly rise in temperature. Alarming increases in temperature. Okay, I said. There was more. I just spoke like Madison kept talking. They catch on fire, she said. They can, rarely out, of course, burst into flames. Are you joking? I asked. No, of course not, Lillian. Why would I joke about something like this? She said. Well, 'cause I've never heard of anything like this. 'Cause it just seemed like a joke. Well, it's not. It's a serious condition. Madison, this is wild, I said. I hadn't seen it, okay, she replied, but Jasper has. I guess the kids get really hot when they're agitated and they can just catch fire. I was in shock, but imagine felt easily in my brain. Honestly, children made of fire, that seemed like something I wanted to see. How are they still alive? I asked. It doesn't hurt them at all, she said, shrugging to the highest light of dumbfounded as she was. They just get really red, like a bad sunburn, but they're not hurt. What about their clothes? I asked. I'm still figuring this out, Lillian, she said. I guess their clothes burn off. So they're just these naked kids on fire? I think so. So you can understand why we're worried. I mean, Jasper is their father, though I'm fairly certain that this comes from Jane's family. It's only started once she was raising them up on her own. She was a real handful. I wouldn't be surprised if she's somehow weirdly somatic, but Jasper is stepping up. He's going to take care of these kids, but we have to be smart about it. We've got a guest house on the property. Well, it used to be something else, but whatever. Jasper spent a fortune to have it renovated and properly safeguarded for the children. That's where you and the kids will live. It's really nice, Lily, and it's beautiful. I'd rather live there in this huge house, if I'm being honest. I live with the kids, I asked. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, she said, and she could see on my face this sucked. can arrange for a few days off to have someone else watch them if you need a break one day. And it's just for a summer until we can figure out a more permanent situation, okay? Once the vetting is done and the nomination comes through, it'll be easier. This is weird medicine. You want me to raise your husband's fire children? Don't call them fire children. Don't even joke about it. We can't really talk about it. The doctors have been discreet thanks to Jasper connections, and they're not going to say anything, but we have to get a handle on the situation so that we can figure out how to solve the problem. This is Madison's campaign manager. She looked at the children setting my hair on fire, see these naked fire starters, and she saw only a problem that could be solved with a press release or photo op. I just don't know, I said. Those weird cucumber sandwiches were now making my stomach ache something fierce. My teeth hurt from the sweet tea. Where was Carl? Could he have driven me back to my mom's house? Would Madison even let me leave? Lillian, please, I need you, and I read your letters, okay? I know your life. Don't you really feel like you're giving up much of anything? That friend who stole your television, your mom making you drive her to some casino in Mississippi, we're going to pay you, okay? A ton of money. Oh yeah, it's a lot of work, but Jasper is a powerful person. We can help you. After this is over, you'll be free of your life and you'll have something better. Don't act like you're doing me a favor, I said, a little angry. No, I know that I'm asking a lot from you, but I didn't want any of this, you know, but you're my friend, okay? I'm asking for you to be my friend and help me. She wasn't wrong. My life sucked. It was bad, and it hurt because I had envisioning of a life that was, if not Madison's fate, at least something that could sustain in me. Really, truly, I still believe that I was destined for amazing life, and she tamed these children, and I cooled their wicked fire sickness. Wasn't that the start of an amazing life? Wasn't that something that got opportunity for produced by Okay, I said, okay, I'll watch the kids. I'll be there, what'd you call it, governess. She said, delighted. Well, I'll be that. I promise you I will never forget this. Never. I better get home, I said. Is Carl gone? Can anybody drive me to the bus station? No, Madison, shaking her head, standing up. You aren't going home. You're staying here. You're spending the night. In fact, you don't have to go home if you don't want to. You're buying you everything you need. All new clothes, the best computer, whatever you want. Okay, I said, tired all of a sudden. What do you want for dinner tonight? Our cook can make anything. I don't know, I said. Maybe pizza or something like that. We have a pizza oven, she said. The best pizza you've ever had. We stared at each other. It was 3 in the afternoon. What did we do until dinner? Is Timothy still napping? I asked, and trying to break the awkwardness. Oh yeah, I better go check on him. Do you want a drink or anything? Maybe I can take a nap, I asked. I barely took note of how huge the house was now that I was able to move through it. We went up the spiral staircase like it was some big budget musical. Madison was telling me some nonsense about during the Civil War they took horses up these stairs and hid them in the attic from the Union Army. It's possible I imagined this some kind of fever dream in the aftermath of making life-altering decisions. She led me to the room that looked like there should have been an expelled prince in the bed. Every single piece of furniture seemed like it wedged 1,000 pounds. Probably some 19th century carpenter had built the desk right in the room, and it had been there ever since. There was a chandelier. I lived in a metal note that I needed to stop being so awed by Madison's wealth. I was going to live inside this place. Everything that she owned was now mine. I would need to get used to touch it without being electrocuted. Do you need a nightgown? She asked. I'll just sleep in this stuff, I replied. Sweet dreams, she said, kissing me on the forehead. She was so tall. I've forgotten how she kissed me on the forehead in high school, how soft her lips were, and then she was gone. The house was swallowed her up. I couldn't even hear footsteps. It was almost too much to get in bed. I felt like the dirtiest thing in the house had ever seen. I felt like an orphan who had broken into the mansion. I kicked off my shoes and there discreetly lined them up to the bed next to the bed. I got onto the bed with took actual effort. It was so high up. I closed my eyes and willed myself to sleep. I thought about those two kids on fire, beckoning me with open arms. I watched them burn. They were smiling. I wasn't even asleep. I was dreaming. This was my waking life now. They stood in front of me, and I pulled them into my arms, and I almost burst into flames.